Okay, let's jump right into a deep dive today. We're tackling a topic that feels, well, absolutely avoidable right now. Artificial intelligence.
Uh-huh. AI. It's
Right,
everywhere.
exactly. Everywhere you look, you hear about it. The hype is just immense. Companies are pouring absolutely massive amounts of money into it.
Billions, yeah.
Everyone says AI is the future, the game changer, the revolutionary force that's going to reshape every industry imaginable.
And look, from a technical perspective, that potential isn't just hype. I mean, the capabilities of modern AI systems,
Hmm.
they really can deliver incredible value.
Right.
Things like automating really complex processes or finding patterns in these huge data sets that, no human could possibly sift through. We see examples where it is working. It's solving real problems, creating significant impact.
Exactly. The promise is undeniable. The investment is huge. But here's the puzzle, right? The thing that stands out when you look past the headlines. If AI is so incredibly powerful, if the potential is so vast, why do so many companies seem to struggle so much when they actually try to, put it into practice?
Yeah, why the disconnect?
Why isn't this transition smooth or seamless? I mean, the data we see from reports, surveys,
Yeah.
it points to a really widespread issue. A significant chunk of AI projects just never get past the pilot stage.
Or they just fail to deliver any meaningful return on that massive investment.
Right. It's not just a few isolated incidents. It feels like a systemic challenge.
It is indeed a critical disconnect. That
Yeah.
gap between the, let's say, perceived potential and the reality of implementing it successfully in a complex organization.
Mhm.
And that's precisely the mission of this deep dive today, isn't it? We want to move past the buzzwords, the hype,
Yeah, get under the hood.
and dig into the root causes of why these AI implementation projects so frequently stumble or falter and, well, often ultimately fail.
And we're doing that based on some really insightful material we've been digging into. Think of this deep dive as maybe your shortcut to understanding these core barriers.
Right.
We're drawing directly from analyses of real-world attempts at AI adoption, looking at the common pitfalls, and crucially, trying to identify what factors consistently separate the initiatives that succeed from those that just stall or fall flat.
Our aim is that by the end of this deep dive, you, the listener, will have a much clearer, maybe more nuanced picture.
Hopefully.
It's not just about listing problems, right? It's about understanding the dynamics behind them, recognizing the truly critical elements you need for success.
Yeah.
And as you'll see, the reasons for failure often have surprisingly little to do with the sophistication of the AI tech itself,
Which is fascinating, isn't
and
it?
much, much more to do with the organization, the people, the data,
Yeah.
and the fundamental approach they take.
Which frankly is really interesting. The narrative is often, oh, the AI isn't smart enough yet, or it's just too technically complex for us.
Right. Blame the tech.
But the real story, based on this material, seems to center on much more, well, human and organizational challenges. Let's unpack this. The source material lays out a number of critical barriers, starting with issues of mindset and expectations.
Yes, these are often the very first hurdles. Sometimes they pop up long before any real technical work even begins. They really set the stage,
And if they're misaligned.
the project is likely doomed from the start. Yeah.
Hmm.
Okay, so the first big problem identified here is what's called unrealistic expectations, or the magic box mindset. What does that actually look like in practice?
Well, it stems from a pretty fundamental misunderstanding of what AI is and, crucially, how it works. A lot of stakeholders, maybe especially at higher levels, they hear the hype and they envision AI as this sophisticated autonomous thing you just buy off the shelf. You install it, point it at a problem, and poof, instant solutions.
Like a magic box. Exactly. They see it as this self-contained magic box that needs, minimal effort beyond just buying it to dramatically cut costs or boost revenue or predict the future perfectly.
So it's kind of like buying, say, a really complex industrial robot and expecting it to just start making intricate parts the moment you plug it in,
That's a great analogy.
without any programming or calibration or maintenance or even thinking about the materials it needs.
Precisely. And the consequence of this magic box thinking is almost always the same: overpromising. Because the expectations are so disconnected from the reality of actually implementing a complex, data-hungry system.
Right.
Project timelines get set way too short, expected outcomes are wildly inflated. It just creates immense pressure on the teams actually trying to build and deploy the AI.
Which leads to
Missed deadlines, under-delivery on those big promises, and ultimately just profound frustration and disillusionment across the whole organization.
And then the project gets labeled a failure.
Frequently, yeah, gets shut down, seen as waste of money.
And The source material gives a really relatable example of this. The AI chatbot implementation in customer support at a retail company. Tell us about that one.
Right, so this company, they wanted to deploy a chatbot to handle customer inquiries. Seems pretty straightforward on the surface, right?
Right.
A common AI application.
Yeah, makes sense.
But their expectations, driven by that magic box idea, were exceptionally high
Mm,
and very specific. They expected a dramatic 70% reduction in customer support costs.
70%.
70%, and get this, they expected to see those savings materialize within months.
Wow. Okay, 70% in months.
Yep.
That sounds incredibly ambitious for pretty much any big operational change, let alone throwing new tech like AI at it.
Exactly. And the reality they hit was, well, miles away from that instant transformation they dreamed of.
Whoa.
The core failure points here were a direct result of just underestimating the complexity involved, massively.
How so?
They vastly underestimated the sheer variety, the nuance, the ambiguity, frankly, the emotion tied up in real customer queries.
Right, people don't talk like robots.
Not at all. Customers don't ask simple, perfectly phrased questions. They use slang, they give half the information, they're frustrated, they jump between topics.
It's messy.
It's very messy. And a chatbot, even a smart AI-powered one, needs extensive training to understand that messy, real-world language. And that's exactly where they fell down.
They didn't train it properly.
They didn't train the AI model with enough diverse, labeled, representative, real customer interaction data. Simple as that.
So the bot just couldn't understand what its own customers were actually saying.
Pretty much.
Mm.
It was like trying to teach a student calculus when all they've ever seen is basic addition. The model just wasn't equipped.
And the outcome? Did it just not work well?
It was worse than that. The outcome was the opposite of their goal. Instead of cutting costs and improving efficiency, customer satisfaction plummeted.
Ouch.
Customers weren't getting their issues resolved by this, frankly, dumb bot. They got frustrated. And crucially, that frustration didn't just, vanish.
What happened?
It led to a surge in customers just giving up on the chatbot and demanding angrily, probably to speak to a human agent.
So,
So paradoxically, their overall support calls and costs actually increased.
wow. The magic box didn't just fail, it actively made things worse and cost them more money.
A classic textbook illustration of unrealistic expectations crashing headfirst into reality.
Yeah.
And the key takeaway the source emphasizes from this example is absolutely crucial.
Yeah.
AI is not magic. It's not a magic bullet.
It's a tool.
It's a powerful tool, yes. But like any sophisticated tool, it needs significant effort, expertise, and proper application to actually yield results.
So what does that mean practically? Training, tuning?
Exactly. Success depends on adequate training, feeding the AI large volumes of high-quality, relevant, properly prepared data so it learns the right patterns and responses.
Okay.
It requires tuning, adjusting the model's parameters, its algorithms to optimize its performance for the specific job and context it's going to work in.
Makes sense.
And it demands integration, making sure the AI doesn't just exist in a vacuum, but works seamlessly with existing human workflows, systems, processes.
So the chatbot failure wasn't just about the AI itself being bad.
Not at all. It was about the failure to do that fundamental work, the training, the tuning, the integration.
Right. So the real work isn't just buying the AI, it's all the effort you have to put in to make it understand and operate effectively within your specific business reality.
Absolutely fundamental. You can't skip that. And that links directly to the second major problem highlighted in this section, the lack of a clear ROI or a well-defined business case.
Okay, this sounds like maybe the flip side of unrealistic expectations. Instead of expecting too much magic, you start with no clear purpose at all.
Precisely. While some companies are definitely driven by those over-the-top expectations, many others kick off AI initiatives more out of, say, technological curiosity, or maybe a vague mandate to do something with AI.
Like, AI is hot, we need to be in that space.
Exactly. These projects often bubble up from IT departments or R&D labs or maybe those innovation hubs. The primary goal is just to explore AI's potential or experiment with machine learning or see what this cool new platform can do.
Exploration isn't bad, though, is it?
No, exploration itself is valuable, but funding and running full-blown projects without a clear, defined link to a specific business problem they're actually trying to solve, that's a very common trap.
So it's like deciding you want to use, I don't know, a really fancy robot arm before you even decide what product you want to make or what process needs automating.
Perfect analogy.
You've got the cool tech hammer, but no specific nail in mind.
That's it, exactly. And the consequence of not having that clear business objective, well, there's no defined metric for success.
Right. How do you know if it worked?
How do you measure value? What KPIs, key performance indicators, are you even tracking? How do you know if the AI is performing well in terms of business impact? The answers are usually vague or just non-existent.
And these projects?
They tend to just drift aimlessly. They consume resources, time, money, talent, but lack direction. They fail to show any tangible value that the rest of the business actually cares about.
The source material gives an interesting example here from a legal firm using natural language processing, NLP.
Yes, this firm, they allocated resources to a project specifically intended to just explore AI, focusing on NLP.
Okay, NLP, that's AI understanding human language, right? Analyzing
Yeah.
text, documents.
Exactly. Computers understanding, interpreting, manipulating language.
Yeah.
And for a legal firm, with the sheer volume and complexity of documents they handle.
Yeah, using NLP to help with analysis or review seems like a no-brainer, potentially.
The potential application felt logical, yes. But what was the failure point here?
It wasn't the tech.
No, the failure wasn't in the technical feasibility of using NLP on legal text. The problem was that lack of a business case right from the start.
Oh.
The reality was, after months of work by the tech team, they suddenly realized they couldn't actually define which specific KPIs to track.
They didn't know what good looked like.
Exactly. What was the AI supposed to optimize? Was it about cutting down document review time, improving the accuracy of finding relevant clauses, automating some specific report? Because they started with the technology, let's do NLP, rather than the problem, how can we make partner review 10% faster?
Yeah.
They never clearly defined the target outcome.
So they built something technically interesting, maybe it could even do something useful with legal text, but they didn't know what specific business success looked like for that capability.
Precisely. And the outcome was predictable. The insights the NLP model could generate, maybe finding certain patterns, extracting names or dates, they were never actually used in the firm's day-to-day work.
Why not?
Because there was no defined process for how those insights should drive action or change anything. Without a clear goal or metrics tied back to the actual business operations, the technical output just became, well, a solution looking for a problem it wasn't really designed to solve.
It stayed a technical exercise.
Right. Producing potentially interesting outputs, sure, but outputs that lacked purpose and impact within the firm's actual legal work.
This feels like such a foundational lesson then. The key takeaway stressed by the source is the absolute necessity of starting any AI project with a specific business goal and clear, measurable success metrics.
Absolutely fundamental. Non-negotiable, really. AI has to serve the business. It's a means to an end, not the end itself.
Right.
Building that clear, compelling business case up front forces the organization to articulate the specific problem, quantify the expected value, cost savings, revenue, efficiency, risk reduction, whatever it is.
Define success.
Exactly. Identify who cares, the stakeholders, and define precisely how success will be measured. That whole process provides essential direction, keeps everyone focused, and sets a standard to evaluate progress and the eventual outcome.
And without it.
Without it, like the legal firm, you might build something technically cool, but you're building it in a vacuum, just kind of hoping it'll magically be useful somehow.
So before you even think about algorithms or data scientists or cloud platforms, the absolute first question has to be, what specific measurable business problem are we trying to solve? And how will we know unequivocally if this AI is helping us solve it?
Precisely. That level of clarity is critical for successful AI adoption,
Huh.
which actually brings us neatly to the next big set of challenges, the ones often deeply embedded within the organization itself and its data landscape. Organizational and data challenges.
Ah, yes. The internal hurdles. These often seem stickier than the technology itself, don't they? Problem number 3 is presented as a big one. Lack of executive alignment and sponsorship.
This is absolutely critical. And, it's an area where sometimes technically focused teams can really underestimate the impact.
How so?
Well, you can assemble the most brilliant team of data scientists, right? Identify a perfect use case, build a potentially transformative AI model. But if you don't have active support, visible championing, clear direction from top leadership, that initiative faces an incredibly difficult uphill journey.
Why is executive sponsorship so vital? What actually happens without it?
Because implementing AI successfully often requires pretty significant changes across different parts of the organization,
Like what?
like altering established workflows people have used for years, requiring new kinds of collaboration between teams that maybe don't normally talk, challenging existing job roles, even shifting internal power dynamics around who owns data or who makes certain decisions.
Right, it can be disruptive.
Very, and without a clear, strong mandate from the top, these initiatives are highly vulnerable to, well, internal resistance from teams who are just comfortable with the status quo,
Mm-hmm.
or turf wars between departments may be hesitant to share their data or responsibilities,
Mm-hmm.
or simply getting deprioritized, pushed aside by other initiatives that do have explicit executive backing.
So projects without that top-level support just stall.
They tend to stall, yeah. They struggle to get the traction and cooperation they need across the organization and often just wither and die in those early pilot or planning phases.
So it's not just about getting the budget signed off, it's about leadership actively clearing the path and signaling that this matters.
Exactly. It's about active championship. The source illustrates this perfectly with the example of predictive maintenance in a manufacturing firm.
Okay, predictive maintenance using AI to predict when machines are likely to fail so you can fix them before they break down unexpectedly. That sounds like a really clear business value proposition. Less downtime, more efficiency.
It is a classic high-value AI use case. So in this example, an enthusiastic data science team at a manufacturing firm saw this potential, got excited, and launched a pilot project.
Okay.
They likely built models using sensor data from the machinery, looking for those subtle patterns that indicate an impending failure.
So the data science was probably sound, the idea had obvious merit. What went wrong?
The technical promise just wasn't enough to overcome the organizational inertia. The reality, the core failure point, was the resistance they encountered from the operations teams.
The people on the factory floor, maintenance crews.
Exactly. The people on the floor, the maintenance staff, the production managers. These teams had their own established routines, their own maintenance schedules, deep-seated experience, maybe decades managing that machinery.
And they didn't like the AI telling them what to do.
Pretty much. They saw the AI's recommendations, which probably suggested maintenance actions outside their normal schedule, or based on criteria they didn't really understand as coming from this mysterious black box.
They didn't trust it.
Didn't trust it, didn't understand the rationale, and frankly, were comfortable with their existing ways of working. Why change?
So the model was built, but the people who actually had to act on its insights just didn't, or were very reluctant.
Precisely. And the critical missing element here, the thing that could have potentially overcome that resistance, was clear executive pressure, a mandate from leadership.
Saying this is how we do things now.
Exactly. Without leadership stepping in and saying, look, we're moving to an AI-driven maintenance strategy, and these are the new workflows you will follow, the project just couldn't force the necessary behavioral change.
So the operations teams had no real reason to adopt it.
No compelling reason, no directive. So consequently, the pilot project, despite all the data science team's technical efforts, it just couldn't get integrated into the actual maintenance operations. It couldn't demonstrate value in the real world, and ultimately, it died, faded away.
Wow. That really drives home that executive sponsorship is about so much more than just writing a check. It's about driving cultural, operational change.
It's absolutely essential, not optional. That's what the source really highlights. Active executive sponsorship signals to the entire organization this AI initiative is a strategic priority.
Which gives it weight.
Gives it the necessary weight to overcome that internal skepticism and resistance. It helps break down those entrenched departmental silos that might hoard data or resist collaborating across functions.
Which AI often needs.
Which is often vital for AI projects that touch different parts of the business. And crucially, leadership provides the authority needed to mandate and enforce those necessary changes in processes and behaviors so the AI outputs actually get used and integrated.
So leadership isn't just greenlighting the project. They need to be visible champions, actively involved in removing roadblocks and making sure the organization adopts the changes the AI enables.
Exactly. They set the tone and provide the necessary muscle for that transformation. Now, let's delve into a challenge that is perhaps the most frequently cited technical hurdle, but one that is often massively underestimated in its complexity and impact: data readiness.
The source calls this one the silent killer. That sounds pretty serious.
It is, because at its absolute core, AI is just an algorithm that learns from data. That's it.
Right.
Its capabilities, its accuracy, its ultimate usefulness.
Yeah.
They are directly and fundamentally limited by the quality, the quantity, and the accessibility of the data it's trained on and fed with, as the old saying goes, right? Garbage in, garbage out.
Yeah, we hear that about databases and software generally, but it sounds like for AI, it's almost existential.
It really is. The
Yeah.
problem is that many companies jumping into AI vastly underestimate the poor state of their existing data landscape. They just don't realize how messy it is.
What kind of mess are we talking about?
Data is often fragmented, stuck in different systems, siloed, that don't talk to each other. It can be unstructured, locked away in text documents, emails, images, audio files, stuff that isn't easily machine-readable or searchable in a structured way.
Okay.
And critically, even the data that is structured, like in databases, is frequently plagued by quality issues.
That's true.
Inconsistencies, errors, missing values, outdated records, lack of standardization, customer names spelled 5 different ways,
Yeah.
different units of measurement used for the same thing. It's a hairball.
So companies might think they have the necessary data because, well, it exists somewhere in their system.
Always have tons of data.
But when they actually try to gather it up and prepare it for an AI, they find it's just not in a usable state.
Precisely. And this messy reality becomes this massive, often hidden barrier.
Mhm.
It just consumes disproportionate amounts of time and resources, trying to build and train an AI model on poor quality data. It's like trying to build that skyscraper we talked about earlier, but on a foundation of quicksand.
That just won't stand up.
The model won't learn correctly. Its predictions will be inaccurate, unreliable. Or it simply won't be able to find the subtle patterns it's supposed to detect because the data is just too noisy or incomplete or inconsistent.
The AI-based pricing in e-commerce example from the source provides a very concrete illustration of this, doesn't it?
It does. So this e-commerce company, they wanted to use AI to dynamically optimize their product pricing in real time.
Yeah,
Huge potential, right, for revenue growth, competitive advantage.
definitely.
To do this, the AI model would need to learn from historical data how price changes correlated with sales, demand, competitor moves, promotions, all that stuff.
Okay, historical pricing and sales data sounds like something an e-commerce company would definitely have.
Oh, they had the data all right, but the reality, the critical failure points lay in its quality and consistency. Their historical pricing data was incredibly messy.
How so?
It was inconsistent across different product categories, different regions. Promotional pricing wasn't clearly flagged or separated from base prices. Data on returns, discounts, it was all mixed in without clear context. There were just outright errors in the records. It wasn't a clean, uniform, reliable historical record of pricing actions and their market outcomes.
So the data wasn't a trustworthy source for the AI to learn from. It couldn't reliably connect cause and effect.
Not even close. So the very first step, just preparing the data, it became this enormous, unforeseen undertaking.
How long are we talking?
The source highlights that data cleaning and transformation alone became a massive, grueling 6-month effort. 6 months.
Wow.
Just think about the time, the resources, the sheer frustration involved in just getting the data into a semi-usable state before any actual AI modeling could even begin effectively.
That's half a year just cleaning up the mess. And even after that huge effort, did the model work then?
Well, even after those months of cleaning, the model still underperformed significantly compared to what they expected.
Why? If the data was clean.
This often happens because even cleaned data can still be incomplete or lack essential context. Maybe the data had price and sales volume, sure, but it didn't capture crucial external factors,
Right.
like a competitor suddenly dropping their price at the same time, or a big news event affecting consumer confidence, or even the weather. All things that can massively influence purchasing behavior and make a simple price-sales correlation unreliable if you don't have that context.
So the clean data, while maybe tidier, was still insufficient. It didn't paint the full picture for the AI.
Exactly. It couldn't capture the full complexity of the real-world factors driving those pricing outcomes.
So the big takeaway here seems to be that investing in data governance, data quality, data integration, it isn't just a nice to have, it's a fundamental prerequisite for AI success.
Absolutely foundational, non-negotiable. Trying to layer sophisticated AI on top of a messy data foundation is just, it's a path to guaranteed failure, or at least massive frustration and underperformance.
Can you break down those terms a bit? Data governance, quality, integration.
Sure. Data governance is about setting the rules, the policies, processes, standards for managing data across its entire lifecycle, from creation and storage to usage and archiving, ensuring its accuracy, consistency, security, accessibility. Who owns what data? How is it defined?
Okay, the rules of the road for data.
Right. Data quality involves the ongoing work, cleaning, validating, maintaining data to make sure it is accurate and reliable, fixing those errors, filling the
It's a
gaps.
cleanup crew.
Kind of, yeah. And data integration is about breaking down those silos we mentioned, bringing data together from all those disparate systems into unified views or platforms that AI can actually access and use easily.
Getting it all in one place, speaking the same language.
Exactly. These steps, governance, quality, integration, they're often seen as less glamorous than building cool AI models, right?
Yeah.
More like plumbing.
Yeah, the back end stuff.
But they are absolutely critical prerequisites. Skipping them, as the e-commerce example shows, results in massive delays, cost overruns, and ultimately underperforming or failed AI initiatives.
It really sounds like organizations need to prioritize getting their data house in order as a crucial first step, or at least do a very honest assessment of their data readiness and build that cleanup work into the project plan right from day one.
Precisely. Ignoring the data foundation is the silent killer. For a reason, it just silently undermines everything else you try to build on top of it. Okay, should we move on to the next set of critical barriers? These revolve around people, processes, and the challenges of actually getting the AI out of the lab and into the real world.
Right. People, process, and deployment issues. Another area where it sounds like the human and organizational elements are really paramount. Problem number 5, the talent gap and misaligned skills.
Yeah. So when companies decide, okay, we're doing AI, the immediate thought is often, we need to hire some AI experts. Go get some data scientists.
Makes sense.
And yes, skilled AI and machine learning specialists are absolutely necessary. You need them. But the source of material really highlights that simply hiring a few brilliant minds with fancy PhDs, it isn't sufficient.
Why not? Aren't they the ones who build the AI?
They build the models, yes. But building an AI model in a lab environment isn't the same thing as making it actually work reliably and effectively in a real business environment.
Ah.
Successfully taking an AI initiative from a concept to a deployed reality that delivers value requires a much broader, more diverse mix of skills. And crucially, those skills need to collaborate effectively.
What other skills are needed besides the core AML expertise?
Well, you absolutely need people with deep domain or business knowledge. People who truly understand the specific problem you're trying to solve, the nuances of the business processes, how the AI will actually fit into the day-to-day workflow of the users.
The subject matter experts.
Exactly. Then you need skilled data engineers, the people who build and maintain the data pipelines that feed the AI, ensure ongoing data quality, manage the data infrastructure.
The data plumbers we just talked about.
Right. Then you need software engineers who are capable of taking that experimental AI model and integrating it reliably, efficiently, securely into your existing production systems. This is often called productionizing the model.
Yeah.
It's a real engineering discipline.
Making it robust enough for the real world.
Precisely. And crucially, you also need people with change management skills. People who can help the organization adapt to working with the AI, train the users, build trust, manage the transition.
So, a small team of brilliant data scientists working away in isolation, no matter how good they are at algorithms, is unlikely to succeed on their own.
Highly unlikely. The consequence of this talent gap, or just misaligned skills, is that you can indeed end up with a team that builds technically impressive, maybe even brilliant AI models in a controlled environment, a lab, sandbox. But those models never actually make it into production where they can impact the business.
Oh.
Or, even if some basic version is deployed, it's not used effectively or at scale because those necessary complementary skills for integration, maintenance, monitoring, user adoption, they're just missing.
The AI for fraud detection in banking example from the source seems to demonstrate this challenge pretty clearly.
It does. So a bank, obviously, recognized the potential of AI to spot fraudulent transactions more effectively than traditional rules-based systems. Good use case.
Yeah.
They went out and hired a team of highly talented individuals, maybe PhDs, people with deep expertise in machine learning algorithms. Their technical goal was likely to build sophisticated models to identify suspicious patterns in transaction data.
Sounds like a strong technical foundation. So where was the failure point, if the modelers were good?
The failure point wasn't necessarily in the AI modeling talent itself. It was in the lack of those complementary skills needed for real-world application.
Like the productionizing part.
Exactly. They lacked skilled engineers who knew how to actually productionize those complex models. How do you take a model developed in, say, Python or R and integrate it safely and reliably into the bank's core, high-volume, mission-critical transaction processing systems? That requires serious expertise in scalable architecture, low-latency computing, security, robust error handling. It's not trivial.
Okay, so that's one missing piece. What else?
They also lacked sufficient connection with, or maybe involvement from, the domain experts. The actual fraud analysts who work day in, day out reviewing potentially fraudulent transactions.
Why were they needed?
Those experts were needed to help the AI team understand the real nuances of fraud patterns, maybe things the data alone doesn't capture easily. They were needed to provide feedback on the model's output. Is this prediction actually useful? Does it make sense? And most importantly, they were needed to figure out how to integrate the AI's findings into their own investigation workflows. How does an alert from the AI change what an analyst does?
So the project could build potentially accurate models in theory, but they couldn't get them to run reliably within the bank's live systems or ensure the people fighting fraud actually knew how to use or trusted the output.
Exactly. The outcome, according to the source, was that while the project produced impressive models from a theoretical standpoint, great papers, maybe none were ever successfully deployed into the bank's operational systems or used effectively by the fraud teams to actually stop fraud in the real world.
So it failed as a business initiative.
Completely. It remained a technical achievement stuck within a siloed team, but failed to deliver impact where it really mattered.
The key takeaway here then seems really clear. AI success isn't just about hiring the smartest AI specialists. It requires building diverse, cross-functional teams.
Absolutely. That's the core message. You need to bring together the technical skills, the AML folks, the data engineers, the software engineers for deployment with deep business context from domain experts, and those organizational enablers like change management.
And they need to work together.
Collaboratively, yeah. Not in silos. Ensuring the AI solution is not only technically sound, but also practical, integrable, and actually aligned with the real-world operational needs and constraints.
That makes complete sense. You need people who understand the problem, people who can build the solution, people who can make it work within the existing structure, and people who can help everyone else use it effectively.
Precisely. Which brings us very neatly to problem number 6. Poor change management and user adoption. This builds directly on that last point about complementary skills and getting people to actually use the thing.
Right. So even if you assemble the perfect cross-functional team, build a technically sound, deployable AI system, it can still fail if people just don't use it.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
This is such a critical point, and it's frequently underestimated, especially by more technically focused teams. Even a technically perfect AI solution, maybe integrated flawlessly into back-end systems, can completely fail to deliver any value if the intended users,
The people who are supposed to interact with it or act on its outputs.
if they don't trust it or don't understand its value, or simply refuse to adopt it into their daily routines.
Because if the end users just find ways to bypass the AI or ignore its recommendations.
The entire investment is essentially wasted.
Right.
The consequence is the AI just becomes irrelevant to how the business actually operates. Users might find workarounds, stick to their old manual methods, rely solely on their gut feeling or experience.
Rendering the AI investment effectively useless. No efficiency gains, no improved decisions.
Exactly. It just sits there, unused potential.
The source provides an example related to AI in hiring and HR. Tell us about that.
Yeah, this involved a large corporation that decided to implement an AI tool. The idea was to help screen job applicants, maybe analyze resumes, application data, try to identify promising candidates more efficiently.
Okay, that sounds like a logical application, especially for large companies getting tons of applications. AI could potentially speed things up, reduce the manual load.
It certainly has that potential on paper. But the reality, the critical failure point here, lay squarely with the end users, the human recruiters who were supposed to use the tool.
What happened?
They exhibited significant resistance. They felt, pretty strongly apparently, that evaluating candidates required a crucial human touch.
Oh.
An ability to read between the lines on a resume, assess cultural fit, understand subtle nuances in a candidate's background, things they believed an algorithm just couldn't capture. They fundamentally didn't trust the AI screening recommendations.
So, despite the potential for efficiency, the recruiters just preferred their established manual methods. Felt safer, maybe?
Exactly. The outcome, according to the source, was that even though the AI model might have been technically capable of making pretty accurate predictions about which candidates were a good fit, the recruiters largely just continued using their manual screening processes.
They ignored the tool.
Bypassed it, ignored it, worked around it, making the significant investment in that AI technology effectively useless because it just wasn't adopted into the actual hiring workflow.
Wow. This starkly highlights how absolutely essential change management, user education, and actively building user trust are for AI adoption. It's not optional.
Absolutely critical. It's not enough to just provide a new tool and expect people to use it. You have to actively manage the human transition.
How do you do that?
It involves clearly communicating the value proposition to the users, explaining how it will help them maybe make their jobs easier or more effective, not just replace them.
Address the fear factor.
Exactly. It requires educating users on how the AI works, at least conceptually, its capabilities and its limitations. Demystifying that black box perception is huge.
So they understand it better.
Right. It means proactively addressing their concerns about accuracy, fairness, job security, and critically, involving users early in the AI design and testing process. Let them provide input, see the tool's benefits firsthand. That can significantly help build buy-in and trust, overcoming that natural human resistance to change.
So you're not just deploying software, you're implementing a fundamental change in how people do their jobs, and that change itself needs careful, deliberate management.
Fundamentally, yes, it's a people transformation as much as, or maybe even more than, a technical one. And this leads us right into problem number 7, the prototype trap.
Ah, the project that never leaves the lab. This sounds like a common one in many areas of tech, not just AI, right? Where a promising project just never seems to escape the experimental phase.
Precisely. It's a very, very frequent scenario in AI. A team successfully builds an AI model in a controlled environment, a development sandbox. It works great on a limited data set, maybe generates impressive results in a proof of concept, looks fantastic in a demo.
Yeah.
It stays there. It never makes the leap from being a promising prototype to becoming a fully integrated, scalable, reliable part of the production business environment.
Why does that happen so often? If the prototype works, why can't they just, flip the switch and roll it out?
Well, the source points to a failure to adequately plan for and invest in the significant challenges of actually scaling up and integrating the AI into core business processes and the existing production IT infrastructure.
It's harder than it looks.
Much harder. Building a functional AI model in a nice, clean lab environment is a distinctly different challenge and often requires different skills and infrastructure than deploying that same model to handle, say, real-time demands, process massive volumes of live, messy data reliably, ensure security and compliance at scale, and maintain peak performance 24/7 within the company's complex operational systems.
So the consequence is that the prototype, no matter how promising or technically impressive it looked in the demo,
It fails to deliver any real-world business value because it never actually gets used in the real world at the necessary scale or integrated into the critical workflows where it can make a difference.
it just remains an interesting experiment.
Exactly. Maybe it gets showcased in presentations, look what our AI team built, but it doesn't become an operational tool driving tangible results.
The AI for personalized marketing example clearly illustrates this prototype trap, doesn't it?
It does. So a telecom company, they invested in building what was likely a pretty sophisticated, impressive AI engine. The goal was to create highly personalized marketing offers for their individual customers, probably in real time.
Okay, that sounds like a really valuable potential application. Tailoring offers to individual customers based on their behavior, their data.
Absolutely. Huge potential. The potential was definitely there. However, the reality, the critical failure point, lay in the limitations of their existing IT infrastructure.
Their back-end systems couldn't handle it.
Pretty much. The back-end systems, the databases, the processing capabilities they had in place, they just weren't designed to handle the intense demands required to power a truly real-time, personalized marketing engine for a large customer base.
What kind of demands?
Think about processing massive streams of customer interaction data in milliseconds, running complex AI models on that data instantly, and then generating and delivering a tailored offer right at the moment a customer interacts with them on the website, in the app.
That sounds computationally heavy.
Very. They also lack the infrastructure needed to effectively run the necessary A/B tests at scale. You need to constantly compare different AI-generated offers against each other across large segments of your customer base to continuously learn and optimize the AI's performance. They couldn't support that kind of large-scale experimentation easily.
So the AI model itself might have been clever enough to generate personalized offers, but the company's underlying technology just couldn't support delivering those offers reliably or optimizing the system in the real world.
Precisely. The outcome was that this impressive prototype, capable of personalizing messages beautifully in a test environment, remained just that, a prototype.
Stuck in PowerPoint.
Exactly. The source notes it was often confined to internal presentations, like PowerPoint slides showcasing its potential, rather than being implemented in the live production environment to actually run large-scale personalized marketing campaigns and drive revenue.
This really emphasizes a crucial takeaway then: the need to plan for and invest in the deployment infrastructure, the integration with existing systems, really early in the AI development process, not as an afterthought.
Absolutely. It's not enough to just build a cool model. You have to build it with deployment in mind, with scalability, reliability, integration considered from day one.
Think about production from the start.
Yes. Understanding the technical requirements for putting the AI into production, the necessary data pipelines, the computing resources, the integration points with existing applications, monitoring the security infrastructure, all of that is critical. It has to be factored into the planning, the budgeting, the technical design right from the very beginning. Building for scalability and seamless integration from the start is crucial if you want to avoid that prototype trap.
Okay, so we've covered mindset and expectations, organizational and data challenges, and the issues around people, process, and deployment. That brings us to the final set of pitfalls identified in the source material, related to governance, ethics, and some specific technology traps.
Right. Let's look at problem number 8, ethical, regulatory, and security concerns.
This is an area that, quite rightly, is getting a lot more attention as AI becomes more powerful and, well, pervasive in our lives.
It is, and for a very good reason. Deploying AI, particularly systems that interact directly with people or automate decisions that significantly affect them, introduces some really significant and complex risks.
What kind of risks are we talking about here?
Well, there's the potential for bias to be embedded, even unintentionally, in AI models, if the data they're trained on reflects historical, societal prejudices or inequalities.
The AI can learn and perpetuate those biases.
Exactly, making unfair or discriminatory decisions. Then there are serious data privacy violations if sensitive customer or personal data isn't handled with the absolute utmost care and security throughout the AI lifecycle.
And regulations.
And then there's the critical need to comply with a rapidly evolving landscape of regulations. We have general data protection laws like GDPR, but also new AI-specific legislation popping up all over the world. It's complex and changing fast.
And the problem, as identified here, is that many companies, maybe in their rush to get AI out the door, overlook or downplay these critical issues during the initial development phases. They worry about them later.
Precisely. The focus is often so heavily tilted towards just getting the AI model to work technically. Considerations around ethical implications, necessary security safeguards, transparency, compliance requirements, they often get left as afterthoughts. We'll deal with that later.
But sometimes later is too late.
Sometimes it's way too late to address them effectively without significant rework or maybe exposing the company to serious risk.
What are the consequences of ignoring or delaying attention to these issues? How bad can it get?
The consequences can be severe, really far-reaching. Ignoring ethical implications like bias can lead to genuinely unfair or discriminatory outcomes, harming individuals and seriously eroding public trust.
Which is hard to win back.
Very hard. Failure to handle data securely or comply with regulations can result in significant legal trouble, massive financial penalties, huge regulatory fines,
And reputation.
and perhaps most damaging in the long term, severe damage to the company's reputation and customer trust. If customers or the public perceive that a company's AI is unfair, biased, reckless with their data, or non-compliant with the law, they will lose faith. That can have lasting negative impacts on the business, the brand.
The facial recognition in retail example from the source provides a really stark illustration of these consequences, doesn't
It
it?
does. So a retailer chose to implement facial recognition technology, presumably for things like identifying known shoplifters, or maybe generally enhancing security and loss prevention in their stores.
Okay, a technology with very obvious and significant ethical dimensions around privacy and surveillance.
Extremely obvious. And what was the specific failure point related to governance and ethics here?
They just didn't handle it well.
They fundamentally ignored crucial privacy and disclosure requirements. They deployed the technology in a way that was widely perceived as intrusive surveillance, without adequately informing customers that their biometric data, their faces, was being collected and analyzed, or without obtaining proper consent, depending on the specific legal requirements in the regions where they operated. They essentially failed to establish proper governance around the use of this powerful, sensitive technology.
And the outcome wasn't good, I take it.
The outcome was swift and damaging. The lack of transparency, the disregard for customer privacy, it led to significant backlash. from customers, from privacy advocates, intense scrutiny from regulators.
So public pressure.
Huge public and regulatory pressure ultimately forced the company to completely abandon the project, shut it down. So they not only lost the substantial investment they had already made in the technology and its implementation, but they also suffered considerable reputational damage, which, as we said, can take years and years to repair, if ever fully.
It's a really clear case where ignoring governance, ethics, privacy, it wasn't just bad practice, it directly killed the project and actively harmed the wider business.
Exactly. Burned a lot of trust.
So the takeaway here seems incredibly clear. AI governance, which really encompasses addressing ethics, privacy, security, and compliance, it's not something you can treat as an optional add-on or like a checkbox you tick at the very end.
No way.
It's a fundamental survival strategy in the AI age.
Absolutely. The source is unambiguous on this, integrating considerations for bias detection and mitigation, robust data privacy controls, stringent security measures, proactive compliance planning. All of that needs to be embedded into the AI development and deployment lifecycle right from the very beginning.
A security and ethics by design approach.
Exactly. It requires cross-functional collaboration involving legal, compliance, security, risk, and business teams working alongside the technical teams from day one. In an age of increasing public awareness, scrutiny, and regulation, ignoring these factors is just an extremely high-risk approach that can easily derail even technically successful projects and do lasting harm to the business.
Okay. And finally, rounding out this list of pitfalls, problem number 9, vendor lock-in and tool overload.
Right. This is a more technology-focused challenge, but one with really significant strategic implications down the line.
What's the issue here?
Companies, often eager to adopt AI quickly, maybe feel pressure to show progress. They can fall into the trap of chasing the newest, shiniest AI tools or platforms or vendor solutions without doing adequate long-term strategic planning.
It's easy to get wowed by impressive vendor demos or promises of super fast results, right?
Very easy. This platform does it all. But the danger is that many of these specialized tools, or particularly proprietary platforms, can lead to vendor lock-in.
Meaning you get stuck with one provider.
Exactly. You become heavily dependent on that specific vendor's technology, their ecosystem, maybe their cloud platform. And that dependency can severely limit your organization's future flexibility.
How so?
It can constrain your ability to move your AI capabilities to different environments later on, or integrate them easily with other tools you want to use. Sometimes it even reduces transparency into how the AI models built on that platform actually function under the hood.
So you might gain some initial speed or maybe ease of use up front,
Right, the quick start.
but it comes at the cost of being tied to one specific vendor, potentially for years, limiting your future choices.
Precisely. The consequence is reduced strategic agility. It can become difficult or expensive or maybe even impossible to easily migrate your AI models or your data if, say, a much better tool emerges down the road.
Or if the vendor jacks up their prices.
Or if the vendor jacks up prices, exactly. Or if your business needs evolve in a way that the locked-in platform just doesn't support well. It can also limit transparency, as I said, into potentially complex black box models developed on proprietary platforms. And it just generally makes seamless integration with your broader internal data architecture and other critical business systems much harder than it needs to be.
The source uses an example involving AutoML platforms in retail analytics. AutoML is automated machine learning, right? Tools that try to automate the AI building process.
That's right. So a mid-sized retailer, they decided to adopt a specific proprietary AutoML tool. These platforms are designed to automate parts of the machine learning workflow, things like data preparation, model selection, tuning the parameters, often promising to speed up that initial model building phase, maybe reduce the need for deep ML expertise.
So the appeal is getting to results faster, democratizing AI a bit.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's the pitch. And in this case, the tool likely delivered on that promise. Initially, it was probably fast for prototyping, building certain types of predictive models quickly. However,
There's always a however.
there's usually a however. The reality, the significant failure points emerged later on. First, the proprietary tool lacked transparency into how the models it automatically generated actually worked. It was essentially a black box.
Why is that a problem?
Well, it's a problem if you need to explain the AI's decisions to stakeholders or regulators, or if you need to debug performance issues or understand potential biases. If you don't know why the model is making a certain prediction, it's hard to trust it or improve it reliably.
Okay. Lack of transparency. What else?
Crucially, the platform also wasn't very extensible. They found they couldn't easily add custom features or algorithms that were needed for their specific business nuances. They couldn't seamlessly connect it to new data sources they acquired later. They couldn't integrate it deeply with their existing analytics dashboards or operational systems the way they wanted to.
So it gave them a quick start, but then they kind of hit a wall when they needed more flexibility or deeper insight or better integration.
Precisely. The outcome was that when the retailer's business needs shifted, as they always do, or they wanted to build more complex, customized AI applications or integrate the AI more tightly with other parts of their tech stack, they found they just couldn't easily export the models they had built within that proprietary tool. They couldn't easily integrate the platform's outputs with newer technologies or data sources they were adopting elsewhere. Their initial choice, made for speed, ended up significantly limiting their future options and flexibility.
So the key takeaway here sounds like prioritizing things like open standards, platform extensibility, interoperability, and having a long-term strategic vision is really crucial. Maybe more crucial than just seeking maximum speed in the initial prototyping phase.
Absolutely. That initial velocity gain you might get from a restrictive proprietary platform can become a significant liability down the road. Building sustainable AI capabilities requires a foundation that allows for evolution, integration, adaptation.
Future-proofing it, in a way.
Exactly. Thinking strategically about your AI platform choices, considering factors like transparency, data portability, integration capabilities, flexibility, that's essential for building AI capabilities that can actually grow and evolve with your business, not hold it back.
Wow. Okay, hearing all 9 of those potential pitfalls laid out like that, from the unrealistic expectations and fuzzy business cases, through the data readiness nightmares, the lack of executive backing, the talent gaps, user resistance, getting stuck in prototype limbo, ignoring ethics, and getting locked into the wrong technicos. It really does sound like navigating a minefield out there.
It certainly highlights that the path to successful AI implementation is, well, fraught with challenges.
Mm.
It's definitely not a simple technological upgrade you can just order and install.
No.
It requires a really holistic approach, one that addresses all those organizational, human, process, and data factors alongside the technology itself. You can't just focus on the algorithm.
But the good news, I guess, as the source material indicates, is that while failure is common, success is absolutely possible.
Right.
Definitely possible. And the analysis points towards how companies can navigate this minefield and actually get it right. Let's shift our focus now, maybe end on a more positive note. What do the companies that succeed with AI do differently? How do they avoid these 9 traps?
Well, they essentially address the 9 problems we just spent all this time discussing, but they do it proactively and strategically. The path to success involves consciously focusing on and executing well on these critical elements we've identified, shifting the emphasis from just the shiny AI algorithms to the entire surrounding ecosystem.
So it involves deliberately mastering those challenges we just detailed, not ignoring them.
Precisely. The source identifies several key success factors, which, as you'll see, basically mirror the solutions to the problems we've talked about.
Okay.
First, successful companies start with a clear, well-defined business problem and measurable objectives. No ambiguity. They don't do AI for AI's sake. They apply it strategically to solve a specific, valuable business problem with crystal clear metrics for success. That directly counters that fuzzy business case trap.
Right, problem first.
Second, they ensure clean, integrated, and accessible data. They recognize that data is the absolute fuel for AI, and they invest heavily, upfront and ongoing, in data governance, quality initiatives, building robust data pipelines that make the necessary data readily available in usable format. They confront that silent killer head on. They don't ignore the data mess.
Tackle the data problem seriously.
Third, they form and empower cross-functional teams. They understand that AI success requires diverse expertise working together. They bring together the domain experts, the data scientists, the data engineers, the deployment engineers, the change managers, and they foster collaboration and shared ownership. This directly addresses that talent gap and silo challenge.
Pick the right people talking.
Fourth, they prioritize robust change management and actively work to build user trust and drive adoption. They don't just throw the tech over the wall, they educate, communicate the value, address concerns proactively, involve users early and often to overcome resistance, and ensure the AI is actually used and integrated into workflows. That tackles the user adoption hurdle.
Manage the human side.
Fifth, they build for scalability, reliability, and integration right from the outset. They think beyond the prototype. They plan for how the AI will function within the real, messy, existing IT infrastructure, ensuring it can operate at scale, is reliable 24/7, and integrates seamlessly with other critical systems. This helps avoid that dreaded prototype trap.
Plan for production reality.
And sixth, they embed governance, ethics, and security into the entire AI lifecycle, from the earliest planning stages through deployment and ongoing monitoring. They address potential biases, privacy concerns, security risks, compliance requirements proactively, viewing it as essential risk management and a fundamental foundation for building trust, both internally and externally. That counters those governance pitfalls.
Build responsibility in from the start. It sounds like the companies that succeed don't just build better algorithms, they build better organizational capability around AI. They get the whole system ready.
That's exactly it. They treat AI not just as another technology project, but as a fundamental business transformation project that happens to be enabled by technology. It's a strategic shift.
And the source material provides a really compelling example that seems to embody many of these success factors working together. The UPS route optimization story, Orion, right?
Yes, UPS and their Orion system optimizing package delivery routes using AI. It's often cited, and rightly so, as a prime example of AI delivering massive, tangible, bottom-line value.
So what made it work so well, according to the analysis?
Well, their goal was crystal clear from the start. Optimize delivery routes for their huge fleet of trucks to cut mileage, reduce fuel consumption, save time across literally millions of stops every single day. The AI algorithm at the heart of Orion is incredibly complex, sure. It considers thousands of variables, delivery time windows, traffic patterns, road restrictions, pickup commitments.
So there was definitely a very sophisticated technical component. It wasn't simple AI.
Absolutely. The modeling was and is cutting edge. But the source emphasizes that the staggering success of Orion, consistently cited as saving UPS hundreds of millions of dollars every year, wasn't just because they built a brilliant algorithm.
It's the other stuff, too.
Its success required mastering many of those non-technical, organizational human challenges we've been discussing. It demanded, for instance, significant organizational change within UPS.
Like what?
Transitioning dispatchers and drivers away from relying purely on manual route planning and their own local knowledge to actually trusting and following the AI's optimized routes. That required fundamentally altering long-established processes and habits.
Yeah, it sounds hard.
Huge effort. It also required the integration of IoT sensor data from the trucks, getting real-time data streams from sensors on every single vehicle location, speed, engine diagnostics that was crucial to feed the AI for dynamic optimization and monitoring. That was a massive data readiness and integration challenge they had to overcome.
Getting the data flowing reliably.
Then there was the massive task of retraining and change management for the drivers. Tens of thousands of them. The AI often recommended routes that seemed counterintuitive to experienced drivers, maybe fewer left turns, different sequencing than they'd normally choose.
So they had to build trust there.
Drivers had to be trained, educated on the system's benefits, saving them time and fuel too. And ultimately, there had to be a clear expectation, a mandate to follow the AI-generated routes. That required substantial ongoing investment in change management and user adoption across a huge workforce.
And underpinning all of that.
And critically, underpinning it all was robust, unwavering executive sponsorship. Deploying a system that fundamentally changes how every single driver and dispatcher works across a massive global operation like UPS that required clear, consistent support and a strong mandate from the very top leadership. Wouldn't have happened without it.
So it was a monumental technological achievement, yes, but it was only made possible and ultimately successful by an equally monumental effort in organizational transformation, data integration, and people adoption, all backed by leadership.
Precisely. They built the sophisticated technical solution while simultaneously addressing the data challenges, investing heavily in change management and training, ensuring relentless executive support, and building the necessary infrastructure for widespread deployment and ongoing operation. They tackled the whole ecosystem.
And the result? The source gave a specific number for the savings, right?
Yes, a truly stunning, impactful result. The source highlights that the Orion system has resulted in estimated savings of over $300 million per year.
$300 million a year. Wow.
That staggering number just underscores the immense value that AI can unlock when organizations successfully navigate all those implementation challenges and really execute well on the critical success factors when they treat it as that holistic business transformation.
That's a huge return. It really demonstrates the potential rewards out there for getting this right, despite all the pitfalls. Okay, let's try and bring this deep dive to a close. What's the main message, the big takeaway we should leave with after unpacking why so many AI projects seem to struggle?
I think the overarching message is really clear and consistent across the source material we looked at. While AI technology itself is incredibly powerful and holds immense potential, its actual success in a business context is overwhelmingly determined by how it is implemented.
It's the how, not just the what.
Exactly. The widespread failures we see aren't typically because the AI algorithms themselves have fundamental limitations for the task. Rather, they stem from predictable, often repeated challenges related to organizational readiness, the quality of the underlying data, human factors like resistance to change, a lack of clear strategic focus, and inadequate governance and planning.
So the failures are often human and organizational problems, not purely technical shortcomings in the AI itself.
That's the core of it. Technology is a tool. Its effectiveness depends entirely on the environment it's placed in, the quality of the resources it uses, especially data, the skill of the people who wield it and integrate it, and the clear purpose and sustained support it receives from leadership. Simply acquiring fancy AI technology won't magically solve problems if the organization isn't ready in all these other critical dimensions.
That's a really powerful reframing, isn't it? It shifts the focus from just waiting for the AI to get even smarter to the organization needing to get smarter and more prepared for implementing AI effectively.
Well put.
So for you, the listener, if you are involved in or maybe considering AI projects within your own work or your organization, perhaps think about these barriers we've discussed today. Based on this deep dive, what aspects of your organization or your data infrastructure or your current processes might represent the biggest risk factors for an AI initiative?
Yeah, where are your potential weak spots?
Is it maybe unrealistic expectations floating around? Is your data truly ready for AI, honestly? Do you have the necessary executive buy-in and the right cross-functional collaboration setup? Have you really thought through how people will actually adopt and use the AI in their daily work?
Asking those critical, sometimes uncomfortable questions early on, that's probably the most effective way to identify potential pitfalls before they completely derail the project. Understanding why others have failed is really the first crucial step toward building a solid plan for success.
And that brings us to our final thought for you to mull over after this discussion. If, as this analysis consistently seems to show, the most significant hurdles to AI success aren't actually the algorithms themselves, but are instead rooted in our own organizational habits, our data discipline, or lack thereof, our collective willingness to change, and the quality of our leadership and planning.
Well, does that imply that the future of AI's truly transformative impact might hinge less on inventing the next even more amazing breakthrough AI model, and maybe more on our collective ability to adapt our organizations and, frankly, our own approaches to embrace and effectively utilize the powerful technology we already have available today?
Or maybe, considering that incredible impact shown by the UPS example, those hundreds of millions in annual savings, what are the critical non-AI elements? The organizational change, the data strategy, the user training, the executive drive. That might be conspicuously absent from the AI initiatives you see struggling or falling flat around you.
Some interesting things to think about there.
Indeed. That's all for this deep dive.